In the next 30 minutes, you're going to meet one of the most influential, important, and good people in the world, Ambassador Nancy Brinker. After we spoke with the ambassador, a matter related to the Susan G. Komen Foundation and Planned Parenthood arose and was resolved. Nancy Brinker has been our ambassador to Hungary, America's chief of protocol, and the World Health Organization's Goodwill Ambassador. She has been awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor our country can give. And perhaps the most important role of her life came about because of a death. Get ready to enjoy, to learn, and to be inspired. I'm Debra. Let's talk with Ambassador Nancy Brinker. We're here in the Palm Beach home of Ambassador Nancy Brinker. Ambassador Brinker, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. I know how busy your schedule is.
So well, thank you for coming to visit me.
We're happy to be here. Many of our viewers may know you as the founder of the Susan G. Komen for the Cure Foundation, which was named after your sister who died of breast cancer. But they may not know that you yourself are a breast cancer survivor. When did you say to yourself, I have to do something to end the suffering, I have to do something to make a difference?
Well, really, it was before, fairly, 5 or 6 or 7 years before I had developed breast cancer. When my sister died, and right before she died, she looked at me and asked me to promise her that I would do everything I could in my lifetime to make sure that this disease was eradicated, that cured, that families wouldn't have to go through what our family had gone through, and that children wouldn't lose their mothers. And I promised her I would.
And you have kept your promise. When Betty Ford announced, when she was First Lady, that she had breast cancer, she really opened the door for women to be able to stop the fear and do action work. And you really led the movement in that.
Well, Betty and I were very close. She was diagnosed with her disease in about 1974. And when she was, it spiked a use of mammography. Mammography was still fairly newly developed in the country and not in wide usage. And people began to really, here was the First Lady, that famous shot of her in the hospital throwing the football and being public about her disease. Susie Komen was diagnosed with her breast cancer in 1978, and Betty Ford was her role model. She used to say to me, if Betty Ford could go through this treatment, I will too. And for our very first Susan Komen event in 1982, Betty Ford came to our first event and helped us launch what would become the largest global movement against breast cancer.
So that was really the beginning.
Yes.
That's when it really started.
Yes, and today her daughter Susan works with us, and we've had a long-standing relationship with this family, and she was a significant role model and mentor to me.
Well, I can imagine working with her, and she must be thinking how proud she is of you today. What were some of the obstacles you faced in really creating this global movement?
Well, like any movement or any startup anything, it was very difficult to begin this organization because we were operating in a climate of fear. We were just a tiny little organization in Dallas, Texas, who'd committed to do this, and most people didn't believe we would do it, didn't think we could do it. And particularly in an environment where you couldn't use the word breast out loud in the media. You couldn't use it in newspapers or on television programs or radio. You just didn't say the word breast. So we often had to deal in an environment where we talk about women's cancer. There were no cell phones, faxes, or internet, so of course you had no ability to communicate rapidly. Today you'd be able to just start a movement, virally almost, but it's a different world. It was a different world then. So we really had to understand, and it took us a year or two to understand that it had to be a grassroots movement, and we had to start it somewhere, and it took about 10 years for this organization to really take hold in a way that people believed we were really going to. And that was 6 or 7 years after we had begun the race for the cure in 1983. And as the race grew and as we did our very first race for the cure in Washington, D.C. in 1990, with at that time Vice President Quayle and Marilyn Quayle leading the race because her mother had died of breast cancer, it finally broke through in a way that this was truly going to be a national organization with a mission that now had come to Washington. So that was the first time that an event for breast cancer had been done there.
Tell me how Komen became associated with the color pink and how you launched this whole cause marketing campaign.
Well, Susan Komen's favorite color was pink. When we were growing up, our dolls were in pink. She loved pink sweaters and pink color, and she was a very feminine, but it was strong. It was a strong color to her because it always said, she was always proud of being a woman. And it was a color that I felt at the time did not evoke fear, but rather was a symbol that would get people to join. And remember, the fear was so great at the time of Susie's illness, and she was a young woman, and her illness was occurring where she lived in our hometown of Peoria, Illinois. So you didn't talk about breast cancer out loud, particularly young women. So you were very much isolated. And so I thought this was a color that as we did events, we could use to bring people in. And after some of the very first races, we used the pink ribbon, which then other groups adopted. We never thought about owning the pink ribbon, but we were very happy that it became the symbol of breast cancer awareness.
Yes, and launching the whole cause marketing campaign, getting all the companies involved, how did that begin?
Well, again, in those days, I have a marketing background, and I realized that we weren't able to get our conventional messages about breast cancer detection and treatment and programs to people because they weren't reading whatever public literature there was, not really. Magazines weren't writing about it. You didn't hear about it on talk shows on TV. How are we going to talk about this and get people to overcome their fear? Well, we are a consuming country, so I thought. And I had seen one or two cause-related marketing programs. They had done one for the Statue of Liberty in the 70s. And I thought, okay, why can't we use that kind of approach with breast cancer? Why can't we put the color pink on products that are particularly selling things to women, cosmetics and undergarments and clothing? And so I thought it was actually very, very simple. I came to find out that it was indeed very hard to do in the beginning because, again, most companies weren't talking about these sorts of things out loud. And as one CEO of a well-known, at the time, bra company said to me, as she escorted me out of her office, young lady, we are not interested in putting these kind of messages on our product. They say death and dying, they say fear. We're selling hope and beauty and optimism. So it was that kind of thinking we had to overcome for many years.
And what did you say to her when she said that to you?
I asked her what her customers were thinking about, knowing that they were thinking and afraid of this. She said, they're not thinking about this, and the meeting's over.
I wonder what she would say when she walks into Home Depot and she sees your sign there. I mean, really.
Well, sadly, she's not alive today. Sadly, she died, and it's you know, it was sad. I wish she could have seen it. And the intimate apparel industry actually gave me a very and the organization. I am the organization when I get these awards. I'm always representing Susan Komen. Gave us a very nice award some years later. In New York.
Well, you served as ambassador to Hungary, and you really were dealing with the economic and social issues during the time that we had our attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. What did you do as ambassador during this very terrible time in our country?
Remember, I had been asked and signed up to go to Hungary before, of course, long before 9/11 had happened, and spent a lot of time getting ready for the job. And I was going to try to go overseas with I had noticed and had asked to be posted there because there was a real need for more awareness for women, for women's health, for women's issues. And I thought maybe I could be helpful in a country like Hungary, which has always been a great ally of ours and some very shared cultural values, etc. Little did I ever expect, nor did any of the first group of Bush ambassadors who would go out in 2001, did we expect to be walking into what we did. And it soon became, the first year was really all about war. It was 9/11, Afghanistan, and then Iraq. And it was probably one of the most impactful moments of my life ever, besides this war on breast cancer that we're fighting, this mission against this disease. Because I learned so much about myself, about the country, seeing America through a different lens, and yet being part of many, many military actions and solutions, and understanding how broad our reach is around the world, learning things I never learned, and having to do things that were far beyond anything that I could have imagined that I would have been doing at that time.
It must have been an incredible
And it was
time
fascinating, and I had great regard for many, many of the branches of our government, particularly our Department of Defense in times like this. The expertise, the power, the might of our country, and the execution of what we do is rather astonishing.
So you must have learned a lot during that time.
Yes,
right?
I did. And
your son Eric also, he was 9/11. He was working for an emergency command center for an airline.
Right, at JetBlue.
And here you are, you know, doing all these wonderful things, and you have your son out there. What was
I was
that like
terrified.
for you?
Well, the day I was to leave for my post in Hungary on 9/11. And on that day it happened, and then I was trying to call him on the phone because Eric lived in New York. Actually, the office for JetBlue's in Queens, and I was just terrified that something had happened, because I knew when the Trade Center went down, many of the kids who'd worked in one of the investment offices there were neighbors of Eric's in New York, and I was just terrified that somehow he had disappeared. So it took me a while to get a hold of him, and he sent a message through someone else, "Please call my mom, tell her I'm okay." It was a really tense day. And I was so proud of him, what he was able to do there. He was always so customer sensitive. And he was a real leader in that company, so I was very proud of him.
Yes, and today I'm sure still very proud
yes,
of your son.
Yes, he's on the board now of Susan Komen, and he does an extraordinary job. He's a real leader.
Well, he's like his mother.
No, he's probably better and smarter than I am, but thank you.
As Chief of Protocol, you had to advise the President, the Vice President, and the Secretary of State on matters of diplomatic procedure. What was it like traveling all over the world with the President? And tell us about a moment that really stands out in your memory during that time.
It was, well, first of all, the Bushes are very good and long personal friends of mine. So it was a great honor that they asked me to do. It was a senior White House job. I knew that I would have to take a step back once again from Susan Komen, which the only 2 times in my life I ever have were during my time in Hungary, and then this time I knew there were about 2 years left. But traveling with them was truly an honor, a wonderful honor. And President Bush was extraordinarily interested in many things, but particularly in Africa. His work there, which I think still isn't understood, the full impact of his interest and work there through the PEPFAR campaign in Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa, and all over it is now really coming to flower. I think people are beginning, and people in the global health community understand how important it was. One of the most meaningful times was when Mrs. Bush, the President and Mrs. Bush and I went to visit PEPFAR clinics in Tanzania and in Ghana, and seeing work there, and in our trip in sub-Saharan Africa was truly stunning to me, and actually gave birth to a program that we just all launched together with the Susan Komen, the Bush Institute, the State Department, Hillary Clinton, PEPFAR, and UNAIDS. We're doing a new program called Pink Ribbon, Red Ribbon, where we will be introducing cervical and breast programs onto the PEPFAR a platform that President Bush had established. So this partnership, or that rather this opportunity I had to travel with them, now has, I hope, added another opportunity for them and the Institute. They've led this program to grow and flower in this way.
And it was so meant to be for you to be
It was meant to be,
yeah,
in a way, and I'm very proud of the work that the Bushes have done, and that I know in his post-presidency they continue to do. I think he will have a very long-lasting interest and an ability to lead in these global health issues and other issues.
Ambassador Brinker, you've received so many honors. Time magazine named you one of the 100 most influential people in the world. Ladies' Home Journal said you were one of the most important women of the 20th century. Biography magazine listed you as one of the 25 most powerful women in America. and you've been recognized by Democrats, Republicans, by President Reagan and Bush, and in 2009, President Obama awarded you with the Medal of Freedom, calling you a catalyst for suffering in the world. How does that make you feel when you see that you're being recognized by all these important, powerful people and institutions, and that they actually come to you for counsel?
It is honors that I can't describe. At the time, I know when President Obama honored me with the Medal of Freedom, I was, it still hasn't sunk in exactly, because I'm not a person who reads anything, thinks about it, because I'm always focused on going forward. I'm always practicing. Marie Curie, the two-time Nobel winner, biochemist at the turn of the century, used to say, one never sees what has been done, one only sees what remains to be done. And somehow that's what happens with me. I only look to where we are going, leading from mission and thinking about the mission. So I don't really always believe everything. I think I'm very honored. And I was just thinking about that the other day, how unusual it was that someone who was doing what I do would be given a medal of that import, and it's very meaningful to me. It really is. I mean, I can't describe it. And I never want to be, how shall I say, silly enough to believe that that's the end of it. You don't just, it really, all those sorts of wonderful accolades and words only, I think, inspire you to do more.
Right, they fuel you.
Yeah, you don't say, my job's done now.
Right.
Rather, my job's just beginning. So I was deeply honored.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to ask you, talking about, seeing the end in this, I know that Norman Brinker, he had always said to you, begin with the end.
Yeah.
His words inspired you a lot. I read in your book that he was a big inspiration for you. Yeah. Who else in your life, in your journey, doing the work that you've done, have really left you with words that have, really pushed you to, continue? Yeah,
my mother and father were, and mother's still living. My father was an enormously important figure in my life. I think in any girl's life, a father figure is extremely important, as a mother figure is too. I was just so lucky. I always told them that the greatest trust fund I ever had, I didn't have one, but was my parents, because my father, in a time when it wasn't popular for women to succeed or be leaders, always believed, probably erroneously, that I could do anything I set my mind to, and encouraged me to do that. Mm-hmm. He always wanted me to be a lawyer. I disappointed him that way, but he was very, very supportive of women working hard and achieving what they needed to do, and never quitting. My father used to say to me, it's not that you'll have a bad idea, and it's not that you don't know what to do, it's that you'll quit. Because most people who are doing things quit. So the next time you feel like you want to, just remember, the next day may have been the day that made the big, and I've always practiced that. My husband, Norman, my former husband, was an enormous influence in my life, watching how he built his business. He was like a coach. He was brilliant, and he was a wonderful, wonderful man, and really understood how to motivate people. I had some wonderful women mentors in my life. Mary Lasker. Mm-hmm. I was only able to meet her when she was in her 90s. She was a woman who changed the world. She was the first patient advocate, really, who had the ability to go to Washington, and it was largely due to a lot of her influence that President Nixon signed the National Cancer Act, and I was a student at the University of Illinois, and I understood how important that was, and I watched her and studied her. Betty Ford was a great mentor of mine, a woman named Ruth Altshuler, who's one of my dear friends on the United Way board, leads everything in Dallas, was a great, great influence. And many, many women actually like that who led and who were, I wish I had known, from the Eleanor Roosevelts to the First Ladies to the Betty Fords to the people who did things and who understood how to do them. And I love to read biographies.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I enjoyed reading your book as well. Promise Me was a wonderful, wonderful book.
Thank you.
And there was so many parts of the book that will stay with me, and it made me really connect with your journey. And so I want to commend you on that book. I thought it was wonderful.
Thank you.
Begin with the end.
Yeah.
Do you think now that you started this with $200 and a shoebox with names in it, I read that in your book, and I want to know, now that your organization has raised more than $2 billion, will we win this race for a cure?
Well, we are. If you look at the current news reports about so many more women, it seems in the public's eye, they look at it and they go, why can't it be 50% of people? It is in some cancers, but you know, where the lifespan has been increased X. Let me say this, we are now in the renaissance of cancer research. We're where I dreamed we would have been 10 years after we started. The fact is, this is a very complex disease, and many would argue cancer is actually a naturally occurring thing that happens with cells, and that it is ours to learn how to control it, but it is ours to learn how to prevent. So in the future, yes, we always need a lot of money to fuel this. There's not enough money in the world to fuel it, because a lot of what we do is not just fund the science, create careers that science are focused on, but translating that science into usable, accessible, affordable treatment and care. And then understanding the prevention part is going to be extraordinarily important. Keeping people healthy, growing healthy children with good eating habits, dealing with, if there are environmental substances, what are they and how do we get rid of them? How do we work through them? It's all part of the same system. And then if someone is diagnosed with this disease, how to stem it. There is no great progress that can be made now that cancer is becoming a very chronic disease, you know, where the mortality rates are declining from it. But for the survival rates to continue to climb in meaningful ways, at least over the next 10 years, we must have successful therapy. And successful therapy that isn't just for a few, but for everyone. We have to do that. And that's so much of what Susan Komen does here, even in the Palm Beaches. An effort to make sure that women, low-resource women, who don't have care, are treated, and treated in a timely fashion. And that's a very important part of our work.
Because you do say that it is related a lot to, the success of the breast cancer is related directly to the economic position of the people.
Absolutely. One of the important things that my sister ever said to me is, we were sitting in a cancer center, far too late in her disease, by the way, and we were seeing people flood the cancer center from all over the world, and also all over Texas, poor people, low-resource people who had nothing. And she realized how hard and long it took them to get to a center like that. Right. And she says, you know, where somebody lives really shouldn't determine whether they live. And that's what we still practice today. Where someone lives and how much money they have shouldn't determine whether they live through this disease.
Right, because although people are living with cancer today, it's still every 69 seconds a woman is dying in the world, somewhere in the world, of breast cancer.
And it is devastating when you go into lower resource countries, what happens. And my biggest concern right now in that regard, as being ambassador for cancer control to the WHO, is that 70% of the new cases of cancer, women's cancers, are developing in countries with less than 5% of the resources. So that's destabilizing. That's destabilizing. They know we have care, and we must find approaches, which is why we're doing the Pink Ribbon, Red Ribbon project with in Africa.
And I don't think people realize also that you launched in Rome the first European race for the cure.
Right.
And I was wondering, you know, you see the pink everywhere.
Right.
I was wondering how you feel when you pick up a mint and you see pink, or when you hear that the balloons are going into the sky in Rome for the first race, or that the bridge in Palm Beach is going to be lit in pink. How does that make you feel?
Delivering conventional messages in unconventional ways, to stay in front of the public's consciousness all the time, to understand that as we work in our breast cancer and cervical cancer issues outside of the United States, so it goes for other cancers. This disease is going to be the leading killer of people very shortly. Larger than AIDS, TB, malaria, all of them added up. And not to pit anything against anything, but we've got to deal with cancer as a national and global problem. So it's very important that we keep these symbols alive, and that we keep the bridges lit, and the balloons, and anything else that people look at in their life and they go, oh, I know what that means.
Yes. Well, I want to ask you, if your sister was right here, right now, if you could look right into her eyes, what would you say to her today?
I would tell her that there's nothing that could remove my enthusiasm and commitment from this cause, and that there's nothing that would I believe that people who work with me hand in hand every day at Susan Komen lead from mission, and we will always lead from mission. And today's not a great day for me personally, because I lost someone this morning who was a friend, a young woman.
I'm sorry.
Very much like my sister. There just wasn't enough that could be done. And so when I see those stories still happen every day, though many more aren't happening that way, we are extending lives of people very aggressively now. Mm-hmm. But when I see those failures and feel them, it's as if Susie is reaching right back at me and saying, what about that?
Yeah, keep the light on.
Yeah, keep the light on. Keep the light on.
Mm-hmm. Well, if our viewers want to join you, and I'm sure they would love to know how to join you in your quest and your organization to fight breast cancer, yeah. Tell them how they can get involved.
There are so many points of entry. We have a wonderful affiliate in the Palm Beach area, and they're listed, the Susan Komen Breast Cancer, Susan Komen for the Cure affiliate in Palm Beaches, and they should join. They should come. There's a website for this affiliate. It's a great point of entry because to learn information, mm-hmm. or access our website, komen.org, komen.org, Komen.org. And you go in there and navigate, and you can find any number of ways to help the organization. You can even buy things mm-hmm. to help us. We have a whole part of our website dedicated to cause-related marketing items and to mm-hmm. our own products, that we t-shirts and all kinds of things, because people are busy. Not everybody can devote their life to this as I have, but many people want to do even one small thing, and that's a way to do it. Join a Race for the Cure, get on the website, join our affiliate here. There are many, many entry points.
So just a little bit of pink gives a lot of light.
Yeah,
so any
bit
of
pink
help will help.
Makes a huge difference.
Yes. Ambassador Brinker, I want to thank you so much for your time together today. We really enjoyed being with you, and I want to wish you the best in your journey.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure.
Be sure to join me again next time to meet people who inspire us, make us think, make us laugh, maybe even cry. People making a difference. I'm Debra Tornabin.